So allowed Shedeur to throw that thing up there, one-on-one coverage, and Denzel Boston just goes up and gets it, man. Dude, he is legit. He is a legit weapon, big-time threat, way different from KC Concepcion, obviously.
Shedeur Sanders just had one of those practices where you go back and watch it twice because you don't believe what you're seeing the first time. Day 4 of this quarterback battle in Cleveland, and the numbers are not close. 4 touchdowns, 1 interception for Shedeur. Deshaun Watson, the guy making $230 million fully guaranteed, threw 3 touchdowns and 3 picks in the same session. We're going to break down every throw, every read, and why people inside the building are starting to talk about this kid differently than they were a month ago. Let's set the scene first, because context matters here. This wasn't some scrimmage against air. This was a live camp rep session with the Browns' full quarterback room getting reps back-to-back. Watson, Shedeur, Dylan Gabriel, and rookie Talon Green getting the scraps at the bottom. Todd Monken is running this competition the way he said he would back in the spring. 2 guys, real reps, decided by what happens on the field, not by a depth chart printed in March. And on day 4, Shedeur Sanders opened it up with a rep that honestly looks like it belongs in a coaching tape. Pre-snap motion, Jerry Jeudy shifting across the formation, a shallow cross underneath it that drags a tight end right into the path of the man covering Jeudy. It's a rub concept. It's designed to confuse a linebacker for about half a second, and half a second is all Shedeur needed. He reads it from under center, gets his pad level low so the second level defenders can't see his eyes, lets the run fake do its job, and finds Jeudy standing alone for what is basically a walk-in score. Clean footwork, clean decision, no hesitation. Now here's where it gets interesting, because the box score from the entire practice backs up what that first rep looked like. Shedeur finished 13 of 22. That completion percentage isn't eye-popping on its own, a little under 60%, but 4 touchdowns against a single interception is the number that actually matters in a quarterback competition. That's a 4-to-1 ratio in a live practice setting, which is not something you fake. Dylan Gabriel, for what it's worth, went 5 of 9 with 2 touchdowns and 1 pick, and people around the building have said he's been steadily improving too. But the headline of the day belongs to the guy who's supposed to still be finding his footing as a rookie starter. Deshaun Watson's line tells a different story. 1 more completion than Shedeur technically, but on 3 fewer attempts, and 3 touchdowns paired with 3 interceptions. 3 picks in 1 practice for a veteran quarterback who is 2 years removed from throwing a real NFL pass because of back-to-back Achilles tears is the kind of number that gets people whispering. Not because anyone's writing him off. He's still the $230 million guy on the roster, but when the rookie 5th rounder is out here with a 4-to-1 ratio and the established starter is at a 1-to-1, that gap shows up on film, and coaches notice film gaps a lot faster than they notice box scores.
Come in, we're going to break down yesterday's practice. Amazing day from Shedeur. Starting off with this a little pre-snap motion, eye candy into a shallow cross to Jerry Jeudy. You're going to see our tight end over here on the weak side is going to run this shallow cross here. We're going to pre-snap motion Jerry Jeudy into an even shallower cross, and our tight end is going to get in the way of the guy man-to-man with Jerry Jeudy. So Shedeur Sanders reads this beautifully. Looks like we're working under center. Look how low he gets. Low center of gravity. Makes it really tough for those second-level linebackers to tell what's going on. They bite up on the run fake, and we end up finding Jerry Jeudy wide open here for an easy walk-in touchdown, essentially. Great job. We're going to break down everything you need to know and then some.
Hold on though, before you assume this was some perfect stat padding day for Shedeur, because it wasn't. He threw a pick too. Let's actually look at it, because how a young quarterback misses tells you just as much as how he scores. Here's the interception, and to be fair to Shedeur, it's not a bad decision. It's a good defensive play. Pressure showing off the right side. The defense drops back into coverage, and Shedeur takes what's called a yes-no read on a one-on-one matchup with Jerry Jeudy. The idea is simple. If the safety doesn't rotate over to help, you throw it every time because it's one-on-one and your guy should win. Shedeur goes through his process, looks left first to move the safety, comes back to the right side and puts the ball up for Jeudy in that one-on-one window. The defensive back just makes a really good play on it. That's it. That's the pick. Not a bad read, not a panic throw, just a defender winning a 50-50 ball. Quarterbacks who are actually regressing don't get picked off on plays like that. They get picked off because they don't see the defense at all. Now, compare that to what Watson's interception looked like earlier in the same practice. He's working the corner route, tries to layer it in over a defender, and puts a little too much air underneath the throw. A cornerback named Edmonds reads it the whole way and comes down with a clean, wide-open interception. Also not a terrible decision in isolation, but when you sky a ball into coverage like that, a gift. 2 different picks, 2 different quarterbacks, both explainable, but one guy is doing it on a 4-touchdown day, and the other is doing it as part of a pattern that's now 3 interceptions in 1 practice. And this is where the receiver room becomes part of the story too, because Shedeur isn't doing this alone. Denzel Boston, the Browns' second-round rookie, has quietly turned into one of the most productive weapons on the field through camp. There's a rep where Shedeur reads press man coverage on the far side with what looks like a single high safety cheating toward the other side of the field. That's the green light. One-on-one, throw it every time. Boston goes up and just takes it away from the corner. It's not a contested catch where the receiver got lucky. It's a big-bodied receiver winning a 50-50 ball the way NFL teams draft receivers in the second round to do. People watching camp keep bringing up how different Boston looks compared to Casey Conception, the Browns' first-round pick who's more of an intermediate route runner, the guy who can create after the catch on shorter stuff. Boston is turning into the size and physicality guy, the contested catch guy, and Shedeur is starting to trust him in those one-on-one spots more and more with every practice. That kind of trust doesn't get built overnight. It gets built rep by rep. When a quarterback throws a ball into a tight window and the receiver comes down with it, and then does it again the next day, and the day after that. 4 practices in, that trust is clearly already there between the two of them, and that matters more heading into the season than any single stat line does. It's also worth pointing out that this isn't happening in a vacuum. Harold Fenton Jr. is in that tight end room too, and Jerry Jeudy has now been on the receiving end of multiple touchdowns from Shedeur across these camp reps, including that opening rep with the pre-snap motion. When a young quarterback is spreading touchdowns across 3 or 4 different targets instead of just leaning on one guy, that usually means he's actually seeing the whole field instead of lucking onto a favorite. That's another box that quietly gets checked on the coaching staff's evaluation sheet.
This is actually a nice one from Shedeur. Looks like it's second down, just 7-on-7s, nothing with O-line or D-line. Look at the progressions here. So let me play the clip. Goes through his progressions really well, quickly, and finds an open man. Is that Quinshawn? I couldn't even tell who that was. Bond, maybe? But goes from left to right, scans, and gets to his second and third read very quickly.
2 young players who weren't even drafted in the first round, a 5th-round quarterback and a 2nd-round receiver, are starting to build the kind of chemistry that makes a quarterback competition actually competitive. Let's keep going, because there's more tape to look at. There's another rep from this practice that's worth slowing down on, because it shows something a lot of scouts look for that doesn't show up in a stat line at all, which is anticipation. Shedeur drops back on what looks like a simple 7-on-7 rep. No O-line, no D-line, so it's purely about reading coverage and getting through progressions. He scans from left to right, works through his first read, doesn't find it, gets to his second read, and delivers it on time to an open receiver. It happens fast. It's not flashy. There's no highlight reel scramble or a deep bomb. It's just a quarterback going through his progressions the way he's coached to and making the correct decision quickly. That rep alone probably doesn't make a highlight package, but it's the kind of thing an offensive coordinator watches on the cut-up tape and quietly checks a box next to. Then, later in the same practice, Shedeur runs a deep comeback route with Denzel Boston again, and this one is arguably the prettiest throw of the day. Comeback routes are timing routes. The receiver runs vertical, plants, and comes back downhill toward the quarterback, and the ball has to be thrown before the receiver even turns around. Shedeur drops back, reads that the cornerback's back is fully turned away from him, which means the defender has zero idea when the ball is coming or where it's going to be. That's the leverage a quarterback wants on a comeback route. He throws it with anticipation, leads Boston back toward the football, and Boston comes down with it clean. There was actually a version of this exact route during mandatory minicamp that didn't connect as cleanly with Jerry Jeudy, where the timing was a little off. This time, the placement and the read line up, and it's a clean 8 to 10 yard gain that a lot of offenses will take every single day of the week. Put these 2 reps next to each other, the progression read and the anticipated comeback throw, and you start to see why the conversation inside the building is shifting. It's not just about touchdown numbers on a stat sheet. It's about a quarterback processing information fast enough and trusting his arm enough to throw guys open before they're actually open. That's not something rookies usually do well in year 1. It's usually the last thing to develop.
Okay, like that. Love the comeback row with Denzel Boston. Love how he actually comes back to the football. You guys might not be able to see it. You know, I keep doing this. These camera angles aren't great, so let's see if we can get one more time. See how he comes back to the football? It's still very tough to see. I think Shedeur looked good yesterday, man. For what I'm looking at, not bad.
Now, let's be honest about what this actually means and what it doesn't, because a strong practice in August is not a locked-in starting job. Here's the reality. Todd Monken and this coaching staff have been clear that this competition is going the distance. It's not being decided off one hot practice or even one hot week. The plan reported around the building has been a real two-man competition running through the bulk of training camp, getting settled by what happens across the 3 preseason games. Nobody in the front office is actively shopping Shedeur around the league, and nobody is fielding offers for him either. If Watson wins the job outright, that conversation about moving on from Shedeur simply doesn't happen. This is still Deshaun Watson's roster spot to lose, at least on paper, and $230 million fully guaranteed dollars doesn't get benched over one rough practice in the middle of August. But here's what can't be ignored. Watson is coming off 2 straight Achilles tears. He hasn't thrown a live NFL snap that's counted in almost 2 full years. Early in the offseason program, by most accounts, he actually looked ahead in this race. Somewhere across the summer, that lead started to shrink, and by day 4 of padded work, the rookie is out here putting up a 4-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio against a veteran posting a 1-to-1. That's not a small gap. That's the kind of gap that shows up when coaches sit down and grade the tape at night. General Manager Andrew Berry brought in Ryan Griggs in this offseason as an advisor, someone Berry has known since his Colts days, purely in an advisory role. Nobody got pushed out for it. That's the kind of front office that's building layers of evaluation around this exact decision, because they know how big it is. Todd Monken didn't take this job to hand a rookie the keys just because Watson is hurt, but he also didn't take it to sit on a veteran out of loyalty if the tape says otherwise. He's on record wanting the truest competition possible, and 4 practices and padded work, that's exactly what he's getting. And that's really the story of this camp battle right now. It's not that Deshaun Watson has been bad. 3 touchdowns in one practice is still 3 touchdowns. But bad is a low bar, and Shedeur isn't clearing a low bar. He's clearing a high one. He's not just avoiding mistakes. He's making anticipation throws. He's building real chemistry with a second-round receiver who's turning into a legitimate weapon. And he's doing it with the kind of low mistake rate that teams want out of a starting quarterback, not a developmental rookie. Whether that's enough to actually win the job in September is still an open question, but whether people around this team are noticing, that part isn't really a question anymore.
So Shedeur Sanders did relatively well compared to others. 13 out of 22. Again, not the greatest, but did have 4 touchdowns to just 1 interception compared to Deshaun Watson, who did have 1 less completion, but with 3 total less reps. Also 3 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. Dillon Gabriel, I've heard, is starting to really progress, getting a little bit better as time goes on. That's good to hear. 5-9, right over 50% completion percentage, and had 2 touchdowns, 1 interception in yesterday's practice as well. So Shedeur, maybe not the most efficient, but definitely the best in terms of touchdown to interception ratio.
You've seen the reads, you've seen the numbers, you've seen the receiver room coming alive around him. Let's bring it all together. So here's where day 4 leaves this competition. Shedeur Sanders didn't just have a good practice. He had a practice where every category that matters, touchdown to interception ratio, anticipation throws, chemistry with his new receivers, tilted in his favor. Deshaun Watson had a rough one. 3 interceptions in a single session for a guy who's supposed to be the guaranteed money starter coming back from injury. Dillon Gabriel keeps quietly improving in the background, which matters too, because if anyone gets moved this offseason, it's more likely him than Shedeur, given how this front office has actually operated. Denzel Boston looks like a real problem for opposing defenses already, and Jerry Jeudy has now caught multiple touchdowns from Shedeur across these reps. None of this decides the job today. Monken has said the preseason games settle it. But 4 days into padded work, the gap between the 5th-round rookie and the $230 million veteran is not the gap anyone expected back in the spring. So that's day 4, and honestly, it might be the clearest practice yet in this competition. A 4-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio doesn't happen by accident, and neither does a defense letting your top receiver win one-on-one after one-on-one after one-on-one. The question now is whether Watson can put together a stretch that flips this thing back before the preseason games actually decide it. Drop it in the comments. Do you think Deshaun Watson bounces back and takes this job, or is Shedeur Sanders already pulling away for good? Smash like and subscribe. We'll be covering every single practice through camp, preseason, and into the regular season.